the BMW X3 was the best-selling premium mid-size SUV here in Australia, but it's been a little while since we've driven an X3 here at Chasing Cars, at least one of the mid-spec, sort of normal X3s that you see around an awful lot here in Sydney. This car is the xDrive30e. It's a plug-in hybrid, and it is one of the vehicles that is displaying BMW's power of choice philosophy. Of course, you've also seen Nathan Ponchard, our deputy editor, taking the iX3, the fully electric version that's only about $10,000 more than this plug-in hybrid, for a detailed test. You've also seen Tom Baker taking the X3M competition, but this, as I said before, is representative, or at least a little more representative, of what the average X3 looks like here in Australia. There's a whole host of engine options as well, I should add, from 20i base model up to 40i with a straight 6 petrol engine. This sort of sits at the upper echelons in the middle of the range, about $104,900 before on-road costs, but our car is a little bit specified up. We'll get to that in a minute, but I'd love to hear your thoughts straight off the bat on what you reckon of a mid-size SUV with about 50 kilometers of electric range. Would that fit into your lifestyle? Because that really is going to be the dictating factor as to whether this xDrive30e plug-in hybrid is going to be a good choice, because otherwise I think I'd save about $6,000 or $7,000 and go for the 30D with its lovely straight 6 engine. But let's discuss that in this video. So Tom did drive a mid-spec 30i X3 back in 2018, but since then there have been some changes. In June 2021, this facelift was revealed to the world, but it's taken a little bit longer to get here to Australia. So you can tell it apart by the newly designed front bumper. This car is actually an M Sport variant, but I actually happen to think it looks a little bit less aggressive than the pre-facelift M Sport variant, and I quite like it, even with the bigger grills. You know, grills are getting bigger. That is kind of life at BMW, but you can let me know your thoughts down below, and we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'll also add a couple of things that tell this plug-in hybrid variant apart from the rest of the range, namely all of the BMW emblems have a little blue ring around them, just to let you know that you're being eco-friendly, and blue is the color of I, which brings me to the last little identifier, the electrified by I tag on the side of the car that also features on this car's charging flap. And those are the three ways pretty much to tell this apart, aside from the badge. So it is a pretty low-key vehicle, certainly a lot less restrained than that iX3's quite overt calling of itself an electric vehicle. So if you like that, you can let me know down below. So, jumping into the cabin of the BMW X3, and yes, it's a very familiar place to be, but there are a couple of differences between it and the non-SUV products from BMW, and there are a couple of things that have been changed in the facelift, namely this larger 12.3-inch touchscreen, which is so nice to use, so crisp, and it uses BMW's slightly older infotainment system than you would have seen in the iX3 or the i4 or the iX electric vehicles, but it is, yeah, it just works. Super easy to interact with. You've also got your scroll wheel down here, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto all sorted out for you. So you just get in the car, your phone's already connected, and you can do whatever you want. And you can play your music through what is actually a really decent standard basic stereo. It has decent power and quite a nice natural sound to the bass and the treble, and it renders music really nicely. So you probably don't need to go for the optional extra that is the Harman & Kardon stereo, but you can if you want a fantastic listening experience, because my head says that this X3's sort of boxy proportions really lend itself to rendering music nicely. Now, speaking of options, this car does have two that I'm aware of that are optioned on it, namely the $3,100 panoramic sunroof, which would be nice to see as standard on a vehicle this expensive, especially considering that the 30e is effectively the same specification package as you find on the 30i, which is $15,000 more affordable. And we've also got this $269 worth of open pore black wood here on the trims and on the doors, and that's really nice and tactile to the touch. And on the door trims, you'll notice it's lit up by beautiful little ambient lighting strips and gives the X3 a feeling of classiness, which you expect from a premium SUV. Now, on back to the technology package and the 12.3-inch digital driver's display, which to me has improved since pre-facelift, although this car had analog dials, but the latest iteration of it is really nice. You can see album art quite clearly, and it does a really nice job of rendering that on the screen. You've got all your buttons to interact with stuff like volume and things going on in the touchscreen, and your cruise control buttons on the left. So yeah, it's got this real BMW ecosystem feel to it, like you'd expect. It's super easy to get in and interact with. Everything falls controls where you need it to be, and it just works. Adding to that are these lovely seats here. This oyster leather upholstery is a no-cost option, as is the Phytotonic blue colorway outside on this 30e variant, and they're just so comfortable. You've got adjustable under thigh support. I've got lumbar adjustment for me, though you have to pay extra for the comfort package to get that on the passenger seat. And that also brings steering wheel heating. That seems a little cheap to me. It seems like a little bit of second-class citizenry. I also have memory on this side, whereas the passenger seat doesn't have memory, but we have heating on both seats. And if you want $1,000 extra, we'll get you seat ventilation, which I would say is pretty much a must here in a hot climate such as Australia. Finally, practicalities, and the X3 is definitely designed a little bit with a US market in mind, because that is where this car is actually manufactured for us here in Australia. And you can see it's been designed around offering more practicalities than you would have been used to seeing from BMWs before this era. So you've got generous bottle holders in the doors. You can fit a 1 litre bottle in there super easily, and extra storage down here, though not flock lined, it's just scratchy plastic. So, you know, they could learn something from Volkswagen. You've also got this sliding center bin here, which is quite difficult to open. 2 more smaller cup holders in there, and where you would normally find a wireless charging pad. However, with stock limitations, this vehicle isn't fitted with a wireless charging pad. So check with your dealer on your order if you care about that sort of thing, because obviously that's advertised on the spec sheet and you don't get it here. You've also got a really nice deep center bin here, rubber line down the bottom, USB-C port, you've got a USB-A port in there, and a 12-volt socket as well. And there's this feeling of solidity to this BMW. It doesn't feel cheap at all. It has a really nice, sturdy feeling to all the materials you touch, and everything just feels well appointed, high class, and it's just a nice place to be. With this white leather reflecting a little bit more light into the cabin from the open sunroof. The only thing we change is swapping this black headliner for a white headliner, though we understand that can't be done with a BMW M Sport product. But on the whole, yeah, the X3's interior is still really classy. In the back, the feeling of airiness and spaciousness continues, certainly more so than a dark and dingy 3 Series sedan, so I can understand why you spend a couple of $1,000 more to get yourself an SUV for the comfort of the rear seat passengers. This panoramic sunroof goes all the way back past my head, and I've got so much headroom I could be wearing quite a generous top hat in here and have no issues at all, even at 6'2". On that point behind my own driving position, I've got plenty of knee room, and I got decent amount of toe room as well. Same things can't be said for the 3 Series sedan. So yes, that is absolutely a reason to go for an X3. And of course we get the same nice Vanaska oyster leather back here, a flip down armrest with pop out cup holders, really nice stuff. And even though there is a transmission tunnel in this X3, there is enough space here. It's quite a wide vehicle, so you could fit 3 wide across if you needed to. Though of course, if you want even more space, then you're gonna have to go for something like an X5 or an X7. But for the price and the exterior size of the X3, I think is a really well packaged vehicle. You even have niceties like soft touch materials back here, and all of these little X emblems that appear around the vehicle in here. Nice little classy touch that make it feel like a different line from the regular 3 Series, 5 Series and 7 Series, to kind of differentiate the X3 a little bit from the rest of the range. I should also add that you have your own adjustable air vents back here, adjustable fan speed, and your own climate setting, where you can select whether you want fans blowing in your face, at your feet, and then below that you've got a further 2 USB fast charge ports, so you can keep all your devices charged. Fitting the baby seats to the back of the BMW X3 was no big deal. You got plenty of space to work through, the doors open nice and wide, and the roofline is really high, so you're not going to smack your head doing it. BMW's also got really cute little ISOFIX ports. The tabs just slide out of the way when you click your baby seat in, which means you don't have any covers to lose, and there's no finicking around in there. You just plug them straight in. I'm sitting in the front seat ahead of the rear-facing child seat, and my position is slightly compromised, but if you were shorter than me, say about 180 centimeters tall, you could go on a really nice, decently long journey like this without feeling too compromised. Around the rear of the X3, and again, it is quite a handsome vehicle. You can tell it's the M Sport because you've got this optimistic diffuser and you've got these vents to nowhere, Talking Heads reference if you like. But you can tell it's a facelift because of these new taillights. I actually think the design has grown on me quite a lot. They're kind of smoked like you would have seen in an early 2000s show car, but it's kind of coming around again. It's a similar theme to on the new 2 Series Coupe that I drove a little while ago, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's BMW's new, slightly updated design direction. Anyway, you pop the boot, standard power tailgate, of course, on the 30e, and we get a 450 litre storage space, which actually isn't that generous for a vehicle of this size, just over 4.7 meters long and riding on a 2,800 meter wheelbase. The standard car gets a 550 litre boot. So you lose 100 litres of boot space by going for the plug-in hybrid because all the electrical gubbins sit under the floor. There is a little bit of extra understorage space here where we've got our Type 2 charging cable, which is nice. But yeah, you get this weird lip. And if you have an umbrella, the umbrella, when you accelerate, falls down into here, and it actually creates quite a neat little space in an interesting way. But yeah, like all BMWs as well, I should add, there's no spare tire under the floor of this car, but you do get this really nice, high quality feeling luggage net. It has a real sturdiness to it that reminds you of the good old times when the Germans were making very sturdy, well-engineered vehicles. Not saying that they're not now, but it just has that old-timey feel about it. You've also got a 12-volt socket in the back and a little curry hook and a really nicely finished boot floor carpet. So that's the BMW X3's boot. So let's talk about how much it's going to cost you to run a plug-in hybrid vehicle versus its petrol counterpart. So this basically has the same petrol engine as you'd find in the 20i variant of the BMW X3 and also the 320i sedan. And that car gets about 6.3 litres per 100 Ks in combined testing. Now the claimed ADR consumption figure for this vehicle is 3.2 litres per 100 Ks. Obviously that's better, but that does depend on the state of charge of the battery, of course, because the plug-in hybrid system is sort of all up to you in terms of how you're going to maximize the energy saving and the money saving process that it can give to you. So if you want to charge this 10.8 kilowatt hour usable battery overnight, that's going to give you, in our testing, about 45 kilometers of electric only range. We recorded a 24.6 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometers figure driving around urban environments, sort of representative of what I would call an average Sydney commute. And you can get 2 days of commuting out of this thing on an electric charge. Well, I can. My commute's about 10 kilometers each way. So that actually works quite well for someone like me, especially if you can charge either at home or at work. It's sort of, yeah, it's natural. Obviously you can't fast charge this car, unfortunately, so it's capped at 3.7 kilowatts. So there's not much point in going out to find a public charging station, unlike a pure EV. But let's talk about some other modes of charge that we've got. So we've also done 50 kilometers of commuting with a fully charged battery and in hybrid mode. So it's switching between the electric motor and the petrol motor, like you'd see in a series parallel Toyota RAV4 or something like that. In that testing, we got 1.6 litres per 100 kilometers, which is way better than the ADR combined figure. But when that battery ran out, we saw that quickly climb up to 8.2 litres per 100 Ks, which really tells you how much heavier this car is than its petrol counterpart. It's 190 kilograms more weight on it than the X330i M Sport variant that we get here in Australia. So a little bit of extra complication in terms of the vehicle and weight means that you have to absolutely maximize your charging locations and your chances to get the best out of this plug-in hybrid powertrain. It's definitely going to work for some people, but I don't see that being the majority of buyers out there right now without having something like a fast charge or a longer range that you'd see in a Volvo XC60 Recharge. It's about half the claimed range of that car. But anyway, this is very personal preference, so let me know if a plug-in hybrid is tailored well to your lifestyle down below, because I think I could fit one in quite easily. As for servicing, the X3 xDrive30e costs the same as the rest of the X3 range, $1,950 for 5 years of cap price servicing. Now, BMW doesn't tell you exactly when you have to go to see the dealer for some maintenance, but the BMW will prompt you in its infotainment system when it reckons you need to change things like brake pads, oil changes, and get vehicle inspections and that sort of thing. Now, the other bugbear with BMWs is that still in Australia, the brand is sticking to a 3-year unlimited kilometre warranty. They haven't moved to 5 years like Lexus, Mercedes, Audi, and pretty much all of its premium competitors. And unlike Porsche, you can't get an extended warranty on this BMW X3. You can with the Macan. It's going to cost you $2,790 to extend that warranty out to 5 years. Unfortunately, BMW Australia is not offering that. We really hope they do though, because that would mean living with this car is just that little bit less stressful. As for insurance, the median budget direct customer paid $1,299 to comprehensively insure their new BMW X3 over the last 12 months. Now, your premium will vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your driving history, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. So, driving the BMW X3, is this thing still the benchmark in the midsize premium SUV segment for driving dynamics and overall polish out on the road? Well, without doing a direct comparison to its rivals today, I have to say that it is still one of the best out there. After driving the new NX, the GV70, and a lot of new competitors, this thing is still, holding the crown for me, I think. May not be for you, but ultimately I think there's a level of polish to this car that has been honed over time, and it just works, and I think that's reflected in its pretty decent sales numbers here in Australia. Now, let's talk a little bit more specifically about this plug-in hybrid variant and this powertrain. So under the bonnet, we've got a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine, the BMW B48. We know that from a whole load of vehicles, 3 Series, other X3s in fact, in the range, including the 30i and the 20i. Speaking of that, this engine actually has the 20i as tuned, so 135 kilowatts of power, 300 newton meters of torque. Those outputs alone are pretty decent, but of course this car is boosted with an 89 kilowatt, 265 newton meter electric motor. That's stuck pretty much on the back of the 8-speed ZF transmission, so it's a little bit different to how some vehicles work, but this is how BMW does their plug-in hybrids, and it seems to work really well. There's quite a seamless transition between the two power sources. The petrol provides the bulk of the torque when you're driving around quickly, but you can, as I mentioned in the running costs, lock it into an electric mode and cruise around with no emissions. And that's quite nice. And driving to work or something like that, it actually really does make sense. So for my commute, the drive is about 10 kilometers in and 10 kilometers home, so I can really take advantage of that short-ish electric range. Now it is shorter than other vehicles, as I discussed in the running costs, but it's still there, so it does still mean that this could suit your lifestyle quite well and slightly better than a series parallel hybrid vehicle. And as I talk to you right now, I am actually running this battery pretty much discharged all the way, so it is performing rather like a RAV4 would. You get that crossover between the petrol and the electric motors, but it's mainly done all with the petrol engine. And the result is pretty seamless. You can take off with electricity, and then the petrol motor kicks in, and because it's a BMW B48, it actually sounds quite good when it does that. It doesn't sound raucous or unpleasant or anything, so yeah. I'm quite a fan of this drivetrain. It's definitely a little bit different, and I think ultimately the choice I would make is to go for the 30D diesel engine, straight 6 turbocharged diesel engine with 190 kilowatts of power and 620 newton meters of torque. I think that just suits the SUV's character better, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of country touring. But this still is an interesting option. Really is, and as I said, if it fits into your life, then that may be the case. This is the one to go for. There are other options that are a bit more affordable in this space as well, with more range. So the Lexus NX450h Plus that you guys went along with Tom to check out a little while ago, and also the Volvo XC60 Recharge, which has also been out on sale in Australia for a little while now. Now let's talk about the X3 a little bit more holistically, not just about the powertrain, but about how this car drives. Now when it came out, it was heralded as a sort of change for BMW, a little bit more of a focus on comfort and plushness rather than a focus on all-out handling prowess. But it still has really great dynamics out on a country road. We've got 2-stage adaptive dampers in this car here, this M Sport vehicle. So you've got a comfort setting and you've got a sport setting. The sport just tightens up the body control without adding too much harshness at high speed, though around town, as we are now, if you put it in sport, the ride does get a little bit firmer. And I should add that although the ride is generally good, I think BMW's had to put stiffer springs in the rear of this plug-in hybrid example, and that means that the front and the rear balance just feels a little bit off, a little bit oversprung in the rear perhaps, and overdamped in the rear compared to what the front is, but I understand that's probably a function of the weight of this thing needing that extra control that a stiffer spring brings. But when you do get it out on a country road and you get through the slightly vague initial steering response that you see on all cluster architecture-based cars from BMW, the chassis really grips up, communicates well, and you can make great progress in this BMW X3 out on an open country road. And it's actually fun to drive. It's quite engaging, and I still think it's probably the most engaging of the lot when it comes to driving dynamics out of the Q5 and the regular competitors that you'd see for this thing. It still has that really nice fluid BMW handling that we've come to love. And you also get that extra turn of pace. So with the electric motor and the petrol engine working in conjunction with each other, the 0 to 100 an hour claim for this thing is 6.1 seconds, which is pretty quick for an SUV that weighs nearly 2 tons using only a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Not quite as quick as the Peugeot 3008 plug-in hybrid, but still not bad at all, I reckon. Finally, let's talk about safety, because the X3 did score 5 stars in its ANCAP safety testing in 2017, and there's still a heap of stuff on this car that makes it really rather safe for you and your family. So stuff like forward AEB, reverse AEB, cyclist detection up front, and other things like rear cross traffic alert, blind spot monitoring, and lane keep assist, but it doesn't have BMW's full driving assistant professional package. Now, we've reached out to BMW to ask if that's the case because of semiconductor shortages or because of wiring harness shortages for this particular example. So if I get an answer back from that, whether it's supposed to come with all that gear and it's just missed out on a couple of things like we're seeing quite often at the moment, I'll let you know with a little title on screen. But otherwise, yeah, adaptive cruise control is great in BMWs, but I've been kind of enjoying using basic dumb cruise control. Anyway, that's the BMW X3 xDrive30e. It's a really interesting example of a plug-in hybrid midsize SUV, and you can let me know if you think it would fit into your life down below. So, is the BMW X3 still the benchmark in this segment? I would say in terms of dynamics, even with an extra 200 kilograms stuck into it with this plug-in hybrid variant, yes, it's still one of the best driving cars in this segment, even if this car does seem to trade off a little bit of ride quality in terms of being a little bit more sporty, but you do have adaptive dampers to soften that off. But would I buy the plug-in hybrid variant of this BMW X3? Well, as I said in the running cost segment, it actually really does suit my lifestyle quite well. Having somewhere to charge it at home or at work means that it would mean that my commute could be done on fully electric power, and if I wanted to go somewhere fun on the weekends, then I could do that with the petrol powertrain. But with electric vehicles, with fully electric vehicles now charging so much more quickly, having bigger batteries and that technology advancing faster, it feels like the plug-in hybrid may be just about to fall out of favor with a lot of people. But of course, I'd love to hear your opinions on that and the broader electrification of the automobile industry in the comments section down below. And we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.